G'day gamers, Ranger Tony here with another Pathfinder Kingmaker build video. You asked for it, here it is folks. This is probably the most OP build possible in Pathfinder Kingmaker, and I know that's saying a lot. I personally believe the Kinetic Knight is already an OP build. By the end of the game, at 20th level, you are able to do D6. Minimum of 10d6. It's probably 10d6 plus 10, depending. But you're able to do 10d6 worth of damage from your elemental blade per round. And by that time, you've got 3 attacks per round. That means you're potentially doing up to 180 points of damage per round. Now, I know there are other classes out there, even things such as the knife-fighting rogue, that can do just as much damage. In fact, the knife-fighting rogue can probably do a little bit more, because while they might have 3 or maybe even 4 attacks per round at 20th level, they have to be in the specific position to do a sneak attack. So they can't always do it. Any spellcaster is the same. High-level spells can do a lot of damage if you're lucky, but you can't use them all the time. The Kinetic Knight, every single round, can be doing 10d6 of damage with that blade for every hit. And if they're doing a full attack action and getting 3 attacks per round, that's up to 180 points of damage before crits. And if they want to spend 1 point of burn per round, they can go to a combined attack, combined blade, which will do twice that, or up to 360 points of damage per round. How can you make that better? Introducing the Kinetic Magus. So, the Kinetic Magus is mixing the Kinetic Knight with the Magus class. And let me make something clear straight away. First of all, I don't recommend using the Sword Saint for this. The Sword Saint's big ability that they have is a favoured weapon. And unfortunately, I've tested and you cannot favour the Kinetic Blade as a Sword Saint. So you're wasted in that. And all of the other sort of penalties that you get as a Sword Saint, your lack of armour and things like that, just mean it wouldn't work anyway. The other thing to be aware of is that you can't use an Eldritch Archer with any of the standard kineticists. I've tried that also, it doesn't work. So the throwing of a kinetic blast is not considered a ranged attack that an Eldritch Archer can use. So you can't do that, unfortunately. So what does it mean that you can do? Well, a Magus or an Eldritch Scion, Magus, Eldritch Scion can work really well with the Kinetic Knight. Now, I tested around with this, and my first thought was 10 levels of Kinetic Knight, 10 levels of Magus, jam them together, see how they go. But it doesn't work as well as you would think, because you end up halving the amount of damage that your Kinetic Blade can do. Right? So rather than 10d6 worth of damage by level 20, you can only do 5d6 worth of damage, because you've only got 10 levels of Kinetic Knight. And while your spells that you've got as a Magus can do a lot of damage, for example, the Shocking Grasp spell that you get at first level will go up to 5d6 worth of damage, and even Frigid Touch or Vampiric Touch, they will do significant amounts of damage as well. A Frigid Touch, I think, is limited to only 4d6 worth of damage. You can get Vampiric Touch up to 3d6 worth of damage, but that's it. Like, 1 extra attack per round. So at 20th level, your Kinetic Knight would have 4 attacks per round rather than 3, but you'd only be doing 5d6 worth of damage for each of those attacks, and then you'd be able to tack on another 5d6 worth of damage from, say, a Shocking Grasp. So ultimately, that is 5 times 5d6 worth of damage, which is, I think, 300 points. No, sorry, 150. Yes, 150 points of damage. So that's not that great. So then I looked, well, what's sort of a middle ground? If I took, say, 5 levels in Magus, but 15 levels in the Kinetic Knight, that would still give me 4 attacks per round. I'd have 8d6 worth of attacks from my Kinetic Blade, and a maximum of 5d6 for my spells, which would get up to about 222 points of damage. But then I realised the biggest advantage you're getting here is not from the spells. The biggest advantage you get by combining a Magus with a Kinetic Knight is the extra attack that you get when you use your spells. So you only need to go 2 levels of Magus to get that. Now that only gives you access to 3 spells. You get Touch of Fatigue, which is a cantrip, which you can use till the cows come home. Does no damage, but fatigues your opponent. But you still get that 4th attack every round, doing the full amount of damage. And that means you can be doing not 10d6, but 9d6 worth of damage at 20th level. So that gives you a total of 228 points of damage per round from your Kinetic Magus if you're using... 216 points of damage if you're using Touch of Fatigue. If you do splash out and use your Shocking Grasp, which you'll be able to use 3 or 4 times a day, you'll be able to bump that up to 228 points of damage. And then finally, if you want to spend 1 point of burn per round, and you'll have 6 or so points of burn to play with. If you want to spend 1 point of burn per round, then you can bump that up to 432 points of damage, or 444 if you use Shocking Grasp. As I said, there is no other class out there that can consistently, round after round, allow you to do 228 to 444 points of damage all day long. And that's what this class will do if you stick with it. I admit the Kinetic Knight, and in particular the Kinetic Magus build that I'm going to do, will be a little bit slow to get started, and it will feel that way. But once you get through to, level 7 or 8, from then on, you will really start seeing the power of this build. So let's dive on in. We are going to do and I've picked a halfling for this. The reason for this, if you haven't seen some of my other videos, halflings normally, when they're using a weapon, they have to downgrade the amount of damage that it does because they're using a halfling-sized version of that. And you could use a gnome as well, but the halflings have the advantage of the bonus to dexterity. That's the big advantage that they're getting here that's going to help them out. So, but when they're using a kinetic blade, their damage is not reduced. So a halfling can do all of that, but they also get all of these advantages. So they're less susceptible to fear. They are slowed down, so they move slower than at half the speed of a normal human. But they have bonuses to athletics and mobility. They have bonuses to perception, and they have a +1 racial bonus on all saving throws. If you go with the gnome, you actually end up with some bonuses to attack and defense against lizard creatures, so kobolds and goblins and things like that. But this is a really good race for this class. So we're going to put the strength at 10. We're going to take the dex up to 18, and then we're going to take the constitution to 16. That leaves us with 3 points left. Now, leaving the charisma here at 12 is absolutely perfect for this build, because I'm going to go with Eldritch Scion and not with Magus, and that is more than enough points of charisma for the Eldritch Scion to get hit. Like, technically I could drop 1 point off there and use that if I wanted to. What am I going to do with the rest? Well, we don't have very many points here to spend, so I'm going to put some points here into intelligence, and that last point I'm going to throw up into strength. So that gives us 3 points, although we'll probably end up having 2 points one round, 3 the other to spend. Where you allocate these points is entirely up to you. They're not going to affect the build very much. Some people will want to use put points into use magic device, because you're not going to be able to use scrolls very well or anything like that. At the moment, I'm just going to do these 3 because they're the ones recommended by the class, but it's really down to the situation as to what you put there, and it's not really going to affect your build in any other way. We're going to pick Weapon Finesse at the first level, which is standard, and we're definitely going with fire. So, as I've mentioned before in my other builds, you want to use the energy. So if we were to go air, we would want to pick Electric Blast here. If we were to pick water, we want to take Cold Blast, and we can't pick Earth, or we just pick fire. The reason you don't want to pick Earth is it's a purely physical element. The energy elements allow you to do melee touch attacks rather than standard attacks with your kinetic blade, which means it's even easier for you to hit your opponent, because you don't have to get through their armor, you just have to touch them with the blade. And we're starting with fire, because if we double up with fire at the first chance that we get, when we get to pick another element, which is here at level 7, which will be level 9 overall for us, if we do that, then we will immediately have access to the blue flame blast, and we'll be able to do the combined blasts by spending a point of burn and doing double the damage with our blade. Kinetic Scion, we'll call this one. So that's the start of the build. I'm going to go as quickly as I can through all of the levels. So let's get into that now. So for our second level, we take Eldritch Scion. Bloodlines really don't make a lot of difference to this build. I'm going to take the Elemental Fire Bloodline. Most of this stuff's really not going to affect you very much. But you're only taking 2 levels of this anyway, so you're not even getting, you're not even getting any of that. All you're getting is this little bit here. So we're taking that. We don't need to do anything here. As I said, we only get 2 levels here. Spells here, I would probably take Shocking Grasp and Corrosive Touch. Now, Corrosive Touch does less damage. It only does 1d4 to a maximum of 5d4. Whereas Shocking Grasp does 1d6 to a maximum of 5d6. You could swap Corrosive Touch for, say, Magic Missile or Grease or something like that, but these are the only 2 which are touch-based spells you can get at first level. There we go. That's it. We take our next level as Magus as well, which will give us the Spell Strike. So as you can see, it's a little bit of a slower start. As a kineticist, you're not going to do a lot of damage with your weapons straight up. It's going to take a few levels before that builds up, but we're going to take Weapon Focus here with Kinetic Blast. And as of right now, as of third level, we can do an extra attack per round with the Kinetic Blast. So just queue up your Touch of Fatigue as your default action, and you'll get 2 attacks. One with the Touch of Fatigue, and then another one by itself. We get 1 extra spell here. Something like Vanish isn't a bad idea. You can use it if you need to. Shields, yeah. The only disadvantage of this build is because you're playing the Eldritch Scion, you don't have access to heavy armor. So you can't cast spells wearing anything heavier than light armor. So we're now going to dive into Kineticist. We're going to keep buffing our decks all the way through. We're going to go with Fire's Fury here. So this is all going to be... Everything from here on in is going to be very similar to the Plasma build, right? Particularly in the choices of the Plasma Kinetic Knight that I did, the choices of what specific Kineticist things we do, they're going to be almost exactly that build. The only difference will be some of the feats we'll be taking because we don't need and can't use, say, Shield Focus, for example, because we can't use a shield anymore. We have to have that other hand free to be able to cast spells. As I've said before, Piranha Strike's not worth it. The amount of extra damage you get, you're getting a hell of a lot of extra damage from everything else. If you really want to go overboard, you can add it in, but you're not going to hit as often, so be aware of that. I would take Armor Focus in light armor here to get the best out of your armor as soon as possible, because that's the best armor you're going to be able to get. If you had have taken half and half levels with Kineticist and Magus or Eldritch Scion, you would be able to get to medium armor, which is the armor I recommend for a Kinetic Knight. So you'd be able to go with breastplates. And if you really... No, I wouldn't recommend taking the next armor feat, because you probably won't be able to use it properly for spells anyway. So we're going to take Heat Adaptation here. Or Adaptation, sorry. I always call that Adaptation when it's actually Adaptation. Then we're going to take Dodge to improve our armor class a little bit. Burning Infusion or Dazzling Infusion, it's really your choice here. They're each as good as each other for what they do. I'm going to take Burning Infusion initially. Probably not recommending using it very often, but you've got it there in case you need it. Another point into Dex. So now we're going to take Cold Adaptation. I'm recommending Iron Will, taking this as early as possible. As a Kinetic Knight and a Kineticist in general, you do get some buffs to your reflex saves over time. But the thing that you're going to miss out on the most is your will saves. So buffing that as soon as possible will be good. Expanded Element, pick Fire, and you will get the Blue Flame Blast, the Blue Flame Blade, and you'll be able to do double damage straight away if you want to spend burn for that. Now I recommend taking Kinetic Restoration, which will allow you to restore ability points if you take any of that sort of damage. The best sort of things, spell penetration is not really, doesn't seem to help you very much. So I would actually look at some teamwork feats now, depending on what your team is doing. Shield Wall is not going to help you because you can't use a shield, but Precise Strike or Outflank will. So I'm going to take Precise Strike now, assuming that I'm going to have other members in my party also taking it. And we get Blade Whirlwind at this point. More points into Dex. I'm going to recommend Flame Shield. Improved Critical is definitely what you want to take here. And of course you want that for Kinetic Blast. And I personally feel Unraveling Infusion is the best one of these to take first because it dispels any magic on your target before it damages them. So that can help with things like Blur, Shield, Mirror Image, any of those types of things. But Flash Infusion, Dazzling Infusion, they're all good. Take whichever one you feel you want to at that point. At this point, I don't see a lot of benefit in Elemental Whispers or Foxfire. So I'm going to recommend taking a kinetic bonus feat here and taking Improved Iron Will so that you can get those will saves up even higher. Now, there's a lot of things you can take here. Blind Fight is probably a good one. Critical Focus, though, is the next one we're going to take because we've just taken Improved Critical. So the sooner we take Critical Focus after we take Improved Critical, it just makes that work even better. At this point, I'm going to take Dazzling Infusion because it lasts longer than Flash Infusion does, but we'll probably end up taking Flash Infusion soon as well because we won't have much else to take. Again, points into Dex. At this point, I'd probably go Skilled Kineticist because there's not a lot else that is useful here for us in the bonus feats. You could take a Skill Focus if you wanted to, if there was a skill that you wanted to really bump up. Look, by all means, if you like Foxfire, take it, but I just don't think it really does much. So I'm going to take Skilled Kineticist instead. We're at level 17 now, so we're almost there. We're almost done. Combat Reflexes would be nice, but we don't get attacks of opportunity with the Kinetic Blade, which is a real problem. Not a problem, but I believe it's an incorrect thing. I believe they've taken the rules the wrong way, but that's just me. As I said, Elemental Focus doesn't really seem to help, so even if I took Elemental Focus in Fire, it doesn't seem to help, but it doesn't add any damage. It just makes it harder for your opponent to make save throws, so we'll probably take it anyway, but we have the final expanded element now. I'm still recommending an energy-based one, so I'm going to take Electric Blast. And so that just gives us the Electric Blade. There's no combinations of the other ones. If you take a Physical Blast at this point and you get a combined blade, be aware that that combined blade will probably no longer be a touch-based attack. Okay? It'll probably be a normal attack, which means you're going to hit a little bit less often. So that's just something to be aware of. It's something I've tried to keep there with all of my builds. So we're going to take Aerial Adaptation. Second last level. And we're going to take Greater Elemental Focus in Fire at this point. And I recommend the Pure Flame Infusion because it ignores all spell resistance. So if you have an opponent who is very resistant to spells, this will just blast through them when you turn it on. So your weapon will just basically ignore all of that, which is great. And our final level And aerial evasion is what I'm going to take there. And we are done. And so, as I said, if we just have a look at the sort of damage we can do, our fire blade is doing 10 to 55 points of damage per attack. 10 to 55, so 9d6 of damage. And we get 3 of those attacks per round, but we essentially get 4. So that is 120 points of damage if my defective calculator in my brain is correct. No, sorry, 220 points of damage. 4 attacks at 55 is 220. So that's 220, potentially up to 220 points of damage before crits. Crits could double. If you made 4 attacks and they all critted, that would be 440 points of damage. But I'm not even talking that. I'm just saying normal attacks, no crits, up to 220 points of damage. And then if we swap it for our blue flame kinetic blade, and we have a look at that, that is doing 19 to 109 points of damage. So $436 points of damage potentially per round without a spell. If you can add in, you'll only get an extra 1d6 of damage from Shocking Grasp because you only have 2 levels of mage, and so that doesn't improve the damage from that. So it 442 points of damage potentially before crits, but still, 226 points to 442 points. That's a lot of damage to consider for any class to be able to do. Now, as I said, you don't want to run heavy armor, so you're going to need to swap this out. You're not going to be able to use your shield, so you won't get your attacks with that. So I'll just really quickly jump down into the dungeon and see if we can can engineer a situation where we have 4 attackers around us, and I'm going to show you that we will get 4 attacks with this. We might not all hit, but hopefully we will. They're all going to be first level characters, and we'll just do a quick little total up of all of the damage that we do from those 4 attacks and see how we go. So let's just try that. So hang on. Hello, I'm over this side this time. Yes, so it took me quite a while to actually get to the point where I could find 4 opponents ringing around me. So let's have a look and see. So I have Touch of Fatigue already set up, ready to go. Let's attack and see what happens. Ah, damn it, we had 2 misses. First hit was 61 damage, and then we had a 31. What I'm finding is, as you would sort of expect, 30 is about halfway between 10 and 50, and that's where most of the damage seems to be. So it seems like if I had 3 or 4 hits per round at opponents doing 30 points each, I'd be looking at 90 to 120 points of damage. That's pretty respectable per round. But as we can see there, I did 90 points of damage in 1 round, and 2 of them were misses. So it's definitely possible to get the 4 attacks per round as the Kinetic Scion or the Kinetic Magus, and you're doing 30, 33, 34. You're doing around 30 points of damage on average per hit. So, yeah. I think it's a great class. I think it's absolutely OP. If you're just starting out and you don't know what class to play and you want something that is just going to absolutely destroy everything, I definitely recommend the Kinetic Knight. And if you want to go that little bit extra, go the Kinetic Magus. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a like and share it with your friends. Be sure to subscribe to keep up to date with all of my build videos, and I will see you for the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye.